is this? Is this a mission organization? Is it a missionary sending organization? Is it a cooperation of churches? Is it a partnership? And the answer is yes, it's all those things.
We get to be part of Book of Acts kind of things in our day-to-day, and that the things that we do get to impact people's lives for eternity.
It's always a beautiful thing for me to contemplate what the Lord has done.
The fruit that God has produced through the people of Team Expansion by far outshines anything we would have ever imagined. Team Expansion was formed in 1978 as a result of seeing visitors at the Bible college where I was attending. My wife Penny, we were just dating at the time. We saw these great stories. We were involved deeply in some prayer meetings, and a college class I was taking, required one, on missions. I didn't think I would ever need it. And in the first 9 weeks we studied the Bible basis of missions. I was committed. I said, sign me up. We put all these things together and it became Team Expansion. Like any organization, getting things started requires so much inertia, getting over that hump. I remember traveling with Penny in this camper all over the United States, a travel trailer. We visited every Bible college that at that point was active with Christian churches, and every college it was the same story. Will you come and go with us to Uruguay? Will you pray for this new organization? Will you be a part of this? And after traveling through several of those states, finally God raised up a team, and that became the initial team going to Uruguay. So our commitment was to go to Uruguay and stay for as long as we needed to, so that a team leader would rise up for that team. By God's grace, within 1 year, God had raised up that team leader. His name was Larry Griffin. He became the new team leader for Uruguay, and it allowed us to come back to the United States and start what became known as international services. After just a year, we were working on the second field, which was Venezuela. This team of people came together to go to Venezuela for a summer internship. Out of that summer came the majority of the members of what became the Caracas team full-time. People like Eric and Chris Berry, for example, people like Dave and Donna Lynn, they were all part of that first summer internship. And God used those people for years, in fact, for 2 decades to get that work in Venezuela started, beginning in 1986.
We were really blessed to be a part of what Team Expansion was doing in Venezuela. When the team got there, Venezuela was less than 1% evangelical. And during the 20 plus years that we actually have people there to this day, but it's grown from less than 1% to over 11% evangelical. And it's just been a neat thing that God did that we were thrilled to see happen.
And throughout those late 80s and early 90s, we were in the process of trying to launch fields like Venezuela and others, and it just began to grow very quickly from 5 to 12 to 25. And I remember when we reached 100 missionaries thinking, oh my goodness, where is this going? God had great plans for Team Expansion. In the late 80s and early 90s, we continued to try to grow Team Expansion field by field until we were finally involved in countries on virtually every continent. Team Expansion started asking, what if we were to live and work within the USSR? And we did that. We became, I think, one of the first agencies to actually settle people full-time to live inside of the USSR. The USSR began to crumble into chaos. And at the time, nobody knew for sure what was legal and what was not. By God's grace, we were able to seize the day, and it turned into a very fast-growing movement of churches that were born. And throughout the 90s, we continued to ride that wave of looking for those awakenings throughout the world. Beginning in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was truly a time when Team Expansion began to hit full stride. We began to realize that as we worked together in teams, we needed to lift one another up. We began to focus on member care, taking care of one another and making sure that people in all of our fields were receiving that member care. And we began working hard at forming good partnerships with other agencies, and all the more at forming partnerships with churches that could speak into our agency all the more. Throughout the early 2000s then, we just kept replicating and just add water to all the places where God might send us. We also made a very critical move. We were able to find 61 acres on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky, and we were able to start a campus where people could come together to pray, retreat, and learn about how God was at work redeeming lost mankind. We called it Emerald Hills.
International services and the services that are offered through Team Expansion through international services have grown. I remember starting out in the Hopewell House in this little corner outside the kitchen, and I've seen us move from that little crowded building to this magnificent place at Emerald Hills.
In this last 10 years, we've seen even more changes take place within Team Expansion. And one of the most unique changes is our learning about church planting movements, sometimes called disciple-making movements or church multiplication movements.
I see the greatest possibilities for reaching the lost in the world is through the DMMs, disciple-making movements. I think that has got the greatest potential for growth of the kingdom of anything I've seen in my lifetime.
More and more of our teams began to pick up on this, and as they did, they saw in many cases immediate impact in the curve of baptisms, in the curve of new groups, simple churches that they could multiply, and also in terms of the new attendances that they would see.
It's been awesome to see over the last 10 years us go from an agency that's been planning maybe 2 or 3 churches potentially a year to last year plant over 520 churches and groups. It's been awesome to see us grow from about 8,500 in total mission-wide attendance in 2008 to last year hitting 27,000. That kind of blows my mind. It took us like 30 plus years to get to 8,500, and then in 10 years we went from 8,500 to 27,000.
The fruit that we've been able to see is astounding. It's amazing the way God is blessing, and we now want to try to multiply this throughout churches in the United States and the sending bases with whom we're partnering, and actually throughout the world.
The partnerships that we're developing in South America, in Asia, in Africa, those are really exciting to me because I think that's where God is really going to kind of unleash the floodgates. We still have a part to play, but we're also bringing brothers and sisters from other areas.
I think back then in 1978, we were thinking that these would all be United States sent missionaries. I don't think it entered into our mind at all that we would be talking about sending bases from other countries, and now we have 9 already that are some in their very genesis state, but some already underway, sending missionaries right alongside U.S. sent missionaries to unreached peoples.
I've had the opportunity to be involved in several of these sending bases, and the passion and fire of some of our fellow believers from Brazil, from Venezuela, from the Philippines, it's just glorious.
We started with just one family, I guess you could say, in what you might call international services. Now we have probably 25 of us. We started with the idea that perhaps we were focusing on one field. We didn't know how rapidly we'd be able to spread into another. Now we're involved in about 40 countries with about 70 teams, and we're doing training in a lot more places than that.
The way we do missions, the way we train missions, the way we train team leaders, the way we train best practices for mission, I've just seen us take huge giant steps forward in the time I've been with the agency.
It's an exciting time to be on board with God in making disciples.
These 40 years have been an amazing journey. It's so great to be able to look back at the history of Team Expansion, to know that it began in a little prayer room on the campus of what is now Kentucky University, and that now there are 300 Team Expansion workers working around the world daily in 40-some fields to ensure that the unengaged, unreached peoples of the world get to hear the good news about Jesus.
When I go to a birthday party, I tend to think there's going to be a celebration and a cake. We're going to sing happy birthday, and it's kind of all about the person whose birthday it is. At Team Expansion, we would like to turn that completely right side up. The celebration for 40 years at Team Expansion, first and foremost, wants to send its thanks and its celebration toward God. Thank you, God, for what you've been doing through Team Expansion throughout these last 4 decades. And second, thank you to the workers who have been working side by side to make this possible. But third, and just as importantly, thank you to all the partners that have stood by us these last 4 decades to turn this wild idea into a reality that far surpasses anything that we would have ever imagined. Thank you, and may God bless throughout these next 40 years.